8 short months ago, the world witnessed one of this century's worst massacres. After roughly 550 days of siege, the Sudanese paramilitary rapid support forces overran the city of El-Fasher in Darfur, unleashing a wave of bloodshed. Exactly how many died is unknown. Lower-bound estimates suggest that 6,000 people perished in 3 days. Higher-bound estimates put the figure closer to 100,000 people killed across 6 weeks, with most analysts settling on a mid-range estimate of at least 60,000 dead. In an interview with Sudanese radio station Dabanga in January, Nathaniel Raymond of Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab put the numbers in context, quoting, "El-Fasher is, given the numbers we have now, speaking conservatively, a mass casualty event that rivals the initial death toll after the atomic bombing in Nagasaki." End quote. Now, if you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that one of our regular themes is how the world is not paying enough attention to Sudan's civil war. That is insane, considering it is one of the worst conflicts on Earth, and it's mostly going just unreported. And now, we may be about to, once again, witness the consequences of that ignorance. As you watch this, the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, seem to be preparing for a major offensive against their opponents, the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF. The target is the city of El-Obeid, which has spent much of the previous 3 years under a state of siege. Should it fall, the fear is that it could become another El-Fasher. This is not hyperbole on our part. The UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, specifically name-checked the city in a recent warning about El-Obeid. Nor was he alone. The UK Foreign Secretary sounded a similar alarm, as did the government of France. But the comparisons with El-Fasher should go deeper than just worries about similar levels of bloodshed. Prior to El-Fasher's fall, aid groups, analysts, and Sudanese journalists warned for months about a looming genocide. We even published videos on this very channel trying to get the word out. Yet it was all for naught. The UN, the African Union, the EU, the United States, heck, everyone in a position of power just chose to look the other way until it was too late. And now history may be about to repeat itself. Unless someone does something soon, the world may be about to witness yet another massacre. Tightening noose. Now, as warnings go, they don't come much starker than that recently issued by Critical Threats to quote, "The RSF is setting conditions for an offensive on the SAF-controlled city of El-Obeid in North Kordofan, which is a major operational objective for both sides as it is key to control of central Sudan and breaking the current stalemate." End quote. A commercial center of roughly 500,000 people, El-Obeid has the misfortune to sit at a crossroads connecting some of Sudan's most important locations. To the north and east lie the capital of Khartoum and the fertile, heavily populated lands between the White and Blue Nile rivers. To the west lies most of the current frontline region of Kordofan, and beyond that, the RSF stronghold of Darfur. To the south, the main highway runs all the way down to the besieged town of Dilling, and further south, the main territory held by the RSF's allies in the SPLMN. El-Obeid is even the site of a key pipeline that brings oil up for export from neighboring South Sudan, whose government is increasingly, if unofficially, aligned with the paramilitaries. So you could probably see why both main parties to the conflict might want to control the city. Indeed, you could argue that the RSF have been trying to take it for over 3 years now. We use that slightly ambiguous phrasing there because the paramilitary's initial designs on El-Obeid seem to have been that it was a nice-to-have rather than a key target. As the Sudan War Monitor notes, the RSF initially bypassed it in their rush to capture Khartoum, a city they held for 2 years before finally being dislodged by the SAF at the beginning of 2025. But bypass doesn't mean ignore. Although the RSF didn't bother to attack El-Obeid, they did isolate it from the rest of Sudan, cutting off the highways and establishing a siege. This was only broken after the paramilitaries were routed in Khartoum, allowing the SAF to drive onwards down the highway and establish a resupply route. These were the heady days of army victories, when it seemed like Sudan's military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, might emerge as the civil war's victor. But then came late 2025 and a major shift in the West. After holding out for over 550 days, El-Fasher fell to the RSF, the last city in Darfur to be conquered by the rebels. With their forces freed up to redeploy east, the RSF focused on driving the army back from its gains in Kordofan. Overextended and exhausted, Sudan's military retreated to consolidate its hold over El-Obeid and the highway running down to Dilling. Fast forward to today, and the city is once again under siege, with the SAF holed up alongside its 5th Infantry Division. The Sudan Tribune reports major RSF buildups to the south, west, and north of the city. Meanwhile, videos have surfaced of their troops issuing warnings about what will go down in El-Obeid. To be clear, this is not yet a siege like we saw in Al-Fasher. There, the paramilitaries methodically surrounded the city, built earthen berms to stop people escaping, and then finally fought their way in after a long campaign of bombardment in which the starving population was reduced to eating grass to survive. El-Obeid isn't in quite the same position. The city is still tentatively connected to the other besieged town of Dilling via a side road that the army reopens back in January. While the road is extremely dangerous to use, it's not quite a complete cut-off. Nor are roads out to the north blockaded and utterly impassable. It's more that the RSF has some degree of fire control and can hit and destroy vehicles attempting to resupply. Then there's the military situation. Sudan War Monitor reports that El-Obeid is heavily fortified with extensive trench systems, while the Sudanese Air Force is still able to fly sorties and bomb RSF positions around the city. The Allied Joint Forces are also conducting foot patrols, which is helping to keep the paramilitaries at least somewhat at bay. In fact, there's even an open question as to whether the RSF can muster the forces required to take the city. The Darfuri tribes the paramilitaries draw from are riddled with infighting and occasionally ill-disciplined, as we've seen with some of their recent incursions into Chad, a nation that's normally on their side. Indeed, the SAF remain bullish, with its spokespeople insisting to outlets that the paramilitaries are incapable of breaching El-Obeid's defenses. However, even if true, that does not make the city safe. And that's mainly thanks to a recent technological development that has begun proliferating on Sudan's battlefields, one that most associated with a different war thousands of kilometers north on the plains of Eastern Europe. We are, of course, talking about drones. Fire in the sky. Quoting, "In the past year, Sudan's war has transformed into a drone-dominated conflict characterized by both sides rapidly adapting their aerial tactics and supply chains." End quote. That was the conclusion of an ACLED report released on the 4th of June, detailing the rapid shift both the RSF and SAF have made towards being drone-focused militaries. By their measurements, air and drone events now account for between 40 and 60% of all types of violence experienced in Sudan. Now, it's important here that we don't go imagining that Sudan is becoming another Ukraine. While Kyiv and Moscow are locked in a game of white-hot technological innovation, constantly experimenting with new types of drone, the combatants in Sudan are using mostly paid-for Turkish models. The FPV saturated front lines of the Donbass, this is not. Still, the uptick in drone usage is clearly having major effects, including around El-Obeid. A recent report from inside the city documented an almost constant hum of drones audible in the skies, a source of anxiety for all those living there. Since June the 10th, the drone strikes have come daily, with additional strikes against oil tankers approaching the city, aimed at starving El-Obeid of fuel. To quote critical threats again, drone strikes have reportedly destroyed at least 8 SAF fuel depots and several fuel tankers en route to El-Obeid, causing widespread fuel shortages and disrupting SAF supply lines. The RSF has also targeted the SAF's command headquarters in El-Obeid and reportedly destroyed weapons depots. Other reporting paints a grim toll for civilians. Alongside military facilities, RSF drones have bombed bridges, civilian homes, and power stations. And that last one is particularly important. The destruction of these stations has led to power cuts that frequently take the city's water system offline. Radio de Banga went so far as to call it a water crisis, with prices of bottled water surging as a result. To be clear, things are not yet where they were in the last days of El-Fasher. By the end, famine had been declared in the North Darfur capital, the population of which had swollen due to a vast influx of refugees fleeing violence elsewhere. But things are clearly progressing in the wrong direction. And the direction of travel is made all the more worrying by the fact that El-Fasher was not a one-off. Across the conflict, massacring everyone inside a city has become one of the RSF's calling cards. Prior to the fall of El-Fasher, the worst example of this was likely the 2 separate mass killings that took place in El Geneina toward the start of the war. In that Darfuri city, the RSF conducted a large-scale campaign of ethnic cleansing against those from the Massacre minority. Again, death tolls vary, but a commonly accepted figure is between 10,000 and 13,000 killed. For comparison, that's roughly as many as perished during the 4-year siege of Sarajevo. The fate of Zamzam refugee camp was another such atrocity. A sprawling camp on the outskirts of Al-Fasher, Zamzam was mostly home to women and children. Nonetheless, the paramilitary still attacked it as they tightened the noose around Al-Fasher, killing at least 1,500 people and likely many more. At this point, we should add our regular caveat. As awful as the RSF are, you should not go thinking that their opponents are angels. The SAF routinely and indiscriminately shells civilian areas, conducts reprisal killings, and is allied with Islamist militias that have carried out ethnic massacres. Still, there is little argument that the RSF is the worst of the two. And taken together, the paramilitary's track record explains why everyone is now so worried about El-Obeid. Throughout the Sudanese civil war, the RSF's modus operandi has been to take a city and then unleash a reign of terror against the non-Arab population, with the goal of either exterminating them or forcing them to flee. The one thing going in El-Obeid's favor is that no one expects an ethnic massacre there. As Nathaniel Raymond of Yale's Humanitarian Research Lab has noted of the RSF's advance towards the city, this is not a genocidal move, it's a tactical one. As such, should the city fall, we might not expect to see unrestrained horror on the level of al-Fasher. Although that's a bit like being told that you're lucky enough to only be visiting the third circle of hell rather than the ninth. As we saw during the RSF's 2-year reign over Khartoum, the paramilitaries are still vicious even when they're not genocidal. In the Sudanese capital, civilians were arbitrarily killed, suspected army sympathizers were tortured to death, and ordinary women were abducted and sexually abused on a whim. Given all that, you might be wondering something along the lines of, if the RSF are so awful, why aren't we seeing an international coalition set up to stop them? Why isn't the world as determined to defeat them as it was to defeat ISIS? And the answer to that is depressingly simple. The RSF has powerful international backers that nobody wants to offend. Behind the curtain. Now, the curious thing about the Sudanese civil war is that it should be over by now. At the outbreak of hostilities in April 2023, neither side was remotely prepared for nor capable of sustaining a conflict for over 3 years. That they're still in the game is entirely due to the backing of outside states. The SAF has been sustained by a strange coalition that has at various times included weapons and backing from Iran, drones and drone operators from Ukraine, military kit and support from Egypt, diplomatic support from Saudi Arabia, training from Eritrea, and personnel supplied by Tigrayan rebels in the north of Ethiopia. On the RSF side, the coalition is similarly eclectic, with the paramilitaries getting backing from the federal government in Ethiopia, the warlord ruling Libya's east, the government in South Sudan, and the neighboring nation of Chad, despite the major ethnicity and the Chadian army being one of the same groups the RSF is trying to exterminate across the border in Darfur. On top of that, both sides received Turkish drones, while the RSF was initially supplied with air defense systems and training from Russia's Wagner Group. Now, the reasons why many of these outsiders are backing their respective horses have little to do with the RSF or the SAF themselves. Without getting too deep into the weeds, the motivations of, say, Eritrea and Ethiopia in all this have more to do with their separate rivalry and internal politics rather than deep ideological alignment with one of Sudan's factions. But while all the countries we've named so far, plus several others, have played their part in keeping the Sudanese inferno going, one nation stands out above all others: the United Arab Emirates. Today, the list of bodies that have collected evidence of UAE backing for the RSF is long and comprehensive. 2 separate UN panels have reached this conclusion, as have in-depth reports from Reuters and the New York Times, along with human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Yale Humanitarian Research Lab has used satellite images to track UAE cargo flights, while multiple OSINT researchers have documented planes belonging to the country ferrying supplies to the paramilitaries via airbases in Chad, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. Emirati support for the RSF goes beyond simple weapons shipments, though. Abu Dhabi launders the gold the paramilitaries extract from Sudan's mines through its own markets, while wounded RSF fighters are treated in Emirati field hospitals. So deep does their commitment to the group go that there's a reasonable argument that the key reason Ethiopia is becoming more engaged in the conflict is due to pressure from Abu Dhabi. Yet the key thing the Emirates offer the RSF is the one thing money cannot buy: diplomatic cover. Rich and strategically located, the UAE is a vital ally for a lot of countries that might otherwise be trying to stop RSF atrocities. The United States has bases there, while perhaps more pertinently, the Trump family has business interests there. France sells the UAE its weapons, with Abu Dhabi being one of Paris's biggest customers. The United Kingdom has outposts there. African nations compete for Emirati money and investment opportunities. Both Russia and the West are trying to court the Emiratis. In short, most of the nations with the capacity to exert actual pressure on the RSF have weighed it up and decided it is not worth it. That, for reasons related to money, diplomacy, or geopolitics, it is more useful to keep the Emiratis happy than it is to stop the RSF from slaughtering entire cities. Or as Nathaniel Raymond put it, the world made a choice through its inaction. Particularly the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union made a collective and intentional choice that the economic, security, and diplomatic interests of the West, with the United Arab Emirates, mattered more than the lives of black, indigenous Sudanese. End quote. Where we would differ with his assessment is that it's not just the West. The African Union has been utterly disinterested in stopping this war. Regional powerhouses like Kenya have chosen to cozy up with the RSF. Meanwhile, the rulers in the Gulf are simply content to use Sudan as just another piece on a chessboard, part of their new great game for influence along the Red Sea coast. In short, the Sudan war still rages because no one wants to confront the trade-offs needed to stop it. And so, we once again have the spectre of diplomats warning of a looming massacre, even as their governments turn a blind eye to those funding and facilitating it. If the RSF does attack El-Obeid in the coming days, and if they do manage to break through the city's defenses and commit a massacre, then no one, in any position of power, can say that they were not warned. The evidence is out there. Videos like this are out there. It's now up to our leaders to decide if they'd rather act or simply turn a blind eye to yet another mass killing in Sudan. Thank you for watching.